Katie and Simon, welcome to the Way Champions podcast. It's an honor to have you both on.
Thanks for
Thank you for
inviting us.
inviting us.
Well, it's great. Once we got the UK US West Coast time zone stuff sorted out here, we've finally collected, and I'm excited. When you reached out a couple weeks ago about your new project, what's your goal and the podcast and everything. Talk about that, and then maybe a little bit about sort of each of your background. But why a podcast for grassroots footballers and their parents?
Do you want me to go and have a first stab at that, Katie?
Yes, go on.
Because I lumbered you with it, didn't I? It was kind of I rang you, yeah. And to be kind to Katie John, she actually went with the idea. So I was in a pub, a good old pub in England, where a lot of these kind of ideas start. And we were talking about podcasts, and we were like, oh, not another professional podcast, of sort of world-class footballers being talked and discussed and how many passes they do and how many mistakes they made. And all of the people who in that conversation had children in football, and they were like, yeah, our kids are not really engaged by it because they don't really learn anything, because these are ready formed, they're at the end of their journey, so they don't really learn a lot from these professional footballers. Wouldn't it be great if there was something that they could access and contribute to, and us as parents could help them with by learning how we can help them on their journey? So I said, oh, I'm sure we could do something like that. And the psychology of that would be interesting, given the fact I'm a psychologist. I thought I'd get that in there quick, and then left it. And then one of these people actually is in football and said, oh, I've had a word with some of the football clubs in the UK, and they think it's a really good idea because there isn't much out there for, parents and children to access. And I think some of the clubs would be interested as well to see what the children and the parents are interested in, because then we could engage with it. So I thought, okay, that's interesting. And I thought, I need a sense check on this. So my immediate response was to ring Katie. And I
Mhm.
thought that she'd probably just laugh at the phone down me and say, yeah, what are you on about? But to her credit, or her foolishness,
This May.
yes, she kind of became more animated as we talked for that. Probably were on the phone for about an hour, weren't we, to talk to start
Yeah.
with. And it kind of went from there, John. So I think that's where it initially came from. And then the actual where it's going to, or where it's ended up, is we started thinking about how we might educate, inspire, support parents and children in football, girls and boys on their journey in soccer, football. I think it's kind of spilled out a little bit more. So we've had feedback from other sports like cricket and rugby, where they've said they've listened to it and said it's actually just as applicable to them. And then we've had football clubs listening and go, oh, we've learned something as coaches from the stuff you've done already. So they've become involved as well. But for me, what's really intriguing is we've gone more into a careers type sort of dimension as well, where we're exploring how do people get to where they've got to.
Mm.
Because a lot of children, as you probably know, same in the States, you start off with the ambition of, for example, becoming a professional footballer. There's a very tiny percentage that will end up being a professional footballer. But why can't you stay in the industry doing something else and still be interested in football? Why can't you be a lawyer in football? Why can't you be a brand person or a marketeer in football? Why can't you be a chef in football, for example? And so that for me was really intriguing, that we've had a lot of feedback about that as well, about the useful information we're giving people. How did you become a sports nutritionist? How did you become a chef at a top football club? What was your journey? Where did you start from? How could I mimic that, for example? So that's, for me, that's been really intriguing.
Mm.
I'm going to shut up now and pass over to Katie, because Katie's got the more exciting kind of career. So I'll let Katie describe her background, and then I'll come back and talk a little bit more about the psychology.
Yeah, sure. Katie, go ahead. I mean, in the introduction to the show, listed your accolades and 94 caps for England, and we're recording this right after an unbelievable Arsenal comeback to make the Champions League final, and a very sad day for Chelsea, both clubs that you played for as well. So
Yeah.
bittersweet for you, maybe.
Yeah. It was. I was actually at the Chelsea game.
Oh man,
Yeah, with hope, full of hope that they'd pull it back.
that
But I also
Barcelona
watched the
team is a
Arsenal.
is a good team.
Really good team, and they're great to watch. They
They
are really
really
good to
are.
watch. But yeah, I'm glad for Arsenal, to pull that back. I was in the team obviously that won the Champions League, so 18 years ago. So, you never know, Arsenal back in it and they might bring the trophy home again. So, I mean, it just pushes women's football, especially in England, forward in that regard.
Hmm.
Um, as you say, myself, I started playing from the age of 11. Clearly had some talent for the game. Loved playing football. I just loved the game. Won my first trophy at 14, and I think from that moment on, I sort of never looked back. My career moved forward quite quickly. I was very successful. I loved the feeling of winning and competing, and I just loved playing football. And I feel like my passion for our podcast comes from that. I never had any pressure on me as a child. My mum just let me play football. She never turned around and said to me, it's a man's game or a boy's game. You shouldn't be playing.
Hmm.
She let me go and play and enjoy myself and push myself as far as I wanted to be. And I think for me now, the kids nowadays, the pressure that's put on those kids through sport, through whatever it's social media, through all of those things. And I see it in my own children. So I think that's where part of my passion comes from. I mean, I ended my career, I was a little bit lost, I think, at the end of my career as well. And, there are avenues that you can go outside of the grass. Everyone sees everything on the grass and in the forefront, don't they, in that moment? But actually, within sport, there are so many other jobs outside of it that people don't look at. So if you have a passion for sport, you don't necessarily have to be a professional, or you don't have to play to be a professional. You can do a job in and around that. If you love football, you can do a job in and around it. You can study in and around it. You can be in and around it, but you don't always have to aim to be a pro. And sometimes, we forget the life skills and the social skills and the communication and leadership and all those things that we actually learn through sport, as well as the physical side of the game. And I think all of this stuff gets lost within the bigger picture. So I think that's what me and Simon are trying to do. Psychology is a massive part. There's always a reason behind a behavior or the way you perform or, your confidence and stuff like that. So I think the two of us together in combination, are trying to unpick and teach, kids and parents outside of it, certain behaviors and pressures of what you're doing to these children.
Yeah, and I think that perspective, again, when you're a mom and you look at the pressure on your own, you look at it through your children's eyes, it
Mm-hmm.
changes you as well, right? Of like, okay, this maybe isn't exactly like it was when I was growing up. And again, I think, the beautiful thing about women's football now, and obviously we're talking about both here,
Mm-hmm.
is there's so much more attention, so much more time, so much more there's money in it. You can make a
Investment, yeah.
career. You can
Mm-hmm.
you can do that, which was much harder to do a while back. And so now that there's more money in it, there's going to be more intensity. There's going to be more pressure. And it's really hard, I think, on children who really we just need as parents. Where's the joy? Like
Mm-hmm.
fall in love with the game, and that's the first thing. And I think so many parents. I mean, I actually got this question on a webinar the other day.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you say joy and fun is important, but at what point does that stop mattering and it gets serious? And I'm like, never.
Yeah. No,
And would
never.
that be your experience as well? I mean, I've talked to, Julie Foudy on this podcast. No one has more fun than her, you know?
Mm-hmm. No, it is. Fun is at the forefront of it. And do you know what? Because at the end of the day, if you don't enjoy what you're doing, you're not going to go to training and therefore you're not going to learn and develop. So I think you have to enjoy what you're doing. I've seen a lot of kids over my career actually being forced into something, forced to go training. Do you know what? It's not about us, as parents. We direct them, but they've got to make the choices. And do you know what? If they really want it, then they'll go for it and they'll love the game. I think, with the pressure behind it, I've seen a lot of kids steer the other way and go, I don't want to do this anymore. It's miserable,
Yeah.
with the pressures that come with that. So I think, yeah, absolutely. That's all I ever say to my own kid. I just want you to love football. I don't care what that looks like. I don't care what standard, I don't care. I want you to play sport and I want you to love it.
Yeah. Simon, I mean, from a psychologist standpoint, I'm sure you see this a lot. And I know you probably walk a sideline of a grassroots game and just cringe a lot of like, oh man, because again, I think the vast majority of parents, they're coming from a good place. They're coming from a place of love. They love their kids. They're just not necessarily loving them in a helpful way. And so, your perspective is what do you advise these parents when you see this, if you're asked? What's your advice for them as well?
Well, when I was a child, it's a long time ago, John. Before Katie butts in and reminds me. We used to go out. So literally 8 o'clock in the morning, I'd go out the door, and the only instruction I'd get would be make sure you're home for dinner.
Hmm.
And that would be it. And I don't even remember I didn't have any food on me, any water. I don't know. I actually don't know how we got through the day. Actually, I can't remember how we managed to feed and water, but we did. And then we go home and, your parents would be bothered, and then they'd ask you about your day. The thing we have now is because we live in a society where I don't think parents feel that they can let their children go out in that sense anymore. Particularly, I don't know what it's like in the States, but definitely in this country, it's much more sort of protected in terms of where are you, what you're doing. So it's organized things. And I think when parents organize things, there is that psychology of protection that they're there and they're watching and they're observing. So they're more invested because they're aware what's happening. So to your point, the psychology is because you are now catching my vision, I'm now invested what's going on. Emotionally, I'm a parent, I'm going to be protective of you. So for example, I've seen mums fighting in a car park after a game because one boy tackled another boy. And you're like, well, isn't football, soccer, that is a physical game. It's a contact sport. You're allowed to do that kind of stuff. And I think that's where we're probably in trouble, where there's those two worlds that are colliding. The inability for kids to go out and express themselves with the parents feeling that they're safe. So they are in controlled environments. And that, I think, creates a bit of a pressure cooker because then all the parents there as well. And so it's not neutral, is it? It's not the fact that kids can go off and be creative and experiment on their own. It's under the supervision of their parents who are going to see what's going on. And so I think that's where you get all that conflict now. Whereas I would never have had that. My parents wouldn't even know what I was doing. So there was no way they could interact with any of the other parents when I was younger. So I think that's where we've changed. That whole kind of culture, unfortunately, has kind of created that bit of a car crash for me psychologically, where you've got all the egos. And added to that, I think a lot of parents are vicariously living their old football dreams through their children, probably.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they see themselves. I didn't make it, but you can. You're going to realize my dream. I always wanted to be a footballer. Now you're going to be it. And to Katie's point, some of them don't want to be a professional. They just want to play football with their friends.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because as a parent, right, it feels very good when someone comes up and says, Katie, your son was magnificent today, or what, like it feels good, You're like, that's my DNA. Yes, and then and it's a hard thing to just separate yourself. And I get that all the time, just a friend who was talking about his own kid's journey in sports, and he kept using the word we. I'm like, it's not we, man. It's him. It's her. It's not we. It's not your journey. We did not score 3 goals today. We did not strike out 10 batters. And so this ability to let your child be their own person and be happy for them, but also, I mean, I like Katie, I think every athlete who has been on this podcast, who's been an Olympian, a Premier League player, Champions League, World Cup, regardless of sport, Super Bowl winner, they all also talk about, they all can name like a teammate when they were young who was better than them and got hurt or didn't make it or things like that as well. They're like, or burnt out and just hated it or whatever. So when we put all our eggs in the football basket, there's so many things that can go wrong, aren't there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know what? I had the same situation. I mean, I'm a twin. So my twin sister was actually better than me. So technically she was a better footballer than me, but I had the mentality. So it's really funny. So my career took off pretty quickly because of my mentality, and I was able to just get up and get on, where mistakes would cripple her.
Hmm.
A mistake to me would, like, oh my God, I need to be better. And that was what I was driven by. So my career took off and she got left behind. And funny enough, as twins, we sort of ended up separating a little bit with that, because
Yeah.
I was in the first team and she was in the reserve team. And then she went to play over in America, in Kansas. She went on a scholarship and did that, came back and completely just stopped.
Yeah.
And my career obviously picked up and went forward. But, it's hard.
But
It is hard.
what an amazing thing as well. Like, here you are, you're twins, you're as, genetically close as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And yet you're different. Same parents, same food, same things growing up, and yet you're different. And this is what and parents, um there's a sports psychologist in Canada named Stephen Norris, and he says kids compete and parents compare. And so
Mm-hmm.
parents compare their kid's journey to another kid's journey, and it's like, but it's not the same. She or
Yeah.
he, that's not your kid. So, and your example is a great one. Like your twin sister, who had everything the same exact as you, just the mentality piece wasn't there, the
Mm-hmm.
drive, the joy, whatever. And it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with that. It just
Yeah.
is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so important. And I mean, do you see this as well? Like people come up to you and be like, "All right, what was your career? So I can do this for my kid." And they're like, "Yeah, but your kid's not me."
Yeah. I also think there's pressures, on my own children, because I had the career I had. There's a pressure that they should be good. They should be really good at football, and there's a pressure on them. So I'm obviously conscious as well as a parent that I don't put that pressure on my son. And obviously, people come up and go, "Oh my God, you're Kate Chapman," or recognize me, and I just go, "Yeah." And I also keep that sort of under wraps. I just go, "Yeah," and I don't say a lot more about it, to make sure that the pressure of that is not on him. There's not an expectation. He is him. And my career is nothing to do. He's a different person. He's going to make his own path, and I need to be conscious of that.
Yeah, and you've given him advantages because of what you know and you've learned, and he's around the game, so he has a head start, but then again, it has to be his decision, it has to be his journey. It's not
Mm-hmm.
your journey, whatever. Simon, I mean, for you, do you see this as well? This sort of people comparing the journey of two kids, or they get so scared. Like we talk about in the US, the word we use is FOMO. I don't know if that's a word you're using, but fear of missing out, right? And so we're so scared that our 8-year-old's going to miss out on this team or this opportunity that we just force him or her into it, and we chase after that without ever stopping to ask, is this actually what my 8-year-old wants or 9-year-old wants?
Yeah, and for me, this is a particularly worrying thing for teenagers, because the worst thing psychologically as a parent you can do to your teenager is say, well, Mary does this or Stephen does this
Yeah.
better. You need to match them, because what we know about the sort of neuroscience of the brain is that around 12, 13, we have identity problems. So this is where our identity starts to form.
Mhm.
And one of the big components of that is, unfortunately, a bias for peer comparison. So teenagers are already doing it. And then for your parent to come in and go, well, you need to take a leaf out of Sarah's book.
Mhm.
That is literally pouring fire on, sorry, pouring petrol on the fire. It's making the situation, because they're already focused on what we want to do is stop them doing that, because to Katie's point, we want them to embrace their own journey, which is going to be very different. But
Mhm.
they're already biased towards comparing, and we need to stop that. And coaches, I think, need to be aware that the sort of the children's brain between 12 plus and under 12 is very different how they see using data from other people or role models, for example. They're wired very differently at those two age groups. And so we think they're mature enough to deal with, using examples of other children that they might know. And we think that's going to incentivize them or motivate
Mhm.
them. It's
Mhm.
probably doing the opposite. It's probably making them come back on themselves and going, well, I'm already kind of thinking they're better than me. You've noticed it as well. There's even, to Katie's point, there's even more. I'm putting pressure on me now, and obviously my parents are, because they've already cited the person that I'm already looking over my shoulder at.
Hmm.
Gosh, I feel really pressured now. So probably the worst thing you can do for a teenager.
Yeah. Katie, anything to comment on that? Did you on that journey with your own kids or your own journey?
I think I've always been conscious of not to put too much on them. It's really funny because parents obviously at football know who I am and they can't believe how quiet I am on the sideline.
Hmm.
I'm not a shouty parent. When you get the parents shouting at all the time, I won't. If he needs a little bit of direction, I'll give him direction. We'll have a conversation in the car where he will lead it, and I'll ask him like, what did you do well? What do you think you could do better? And they're the conversations we have. But he doesn't ever look to me for a decision on the football pitch. I'm really conscious of all of that stuff. And I think people are surprised by that because I feel like because I've come from football, I'd be on the sideline barking the whole time, and I take a complete step back. My side is that I'm not going to direct him, I'm going to guide him
Hmm.
if he needs guidance, but it's also really important that he makes mistakes and he figures that out. And I also think that for us as parents nowadays, we don't let kids show emotion or just be. If they're angry or they're sad or they're whatever, we try and fix it all of the time.
Yeah.
We try and fix why they're sad or why they're angry, or rather than just let them go and be angry and let
Hmm.
them solve it and come back when they've figured it out. We
Yeah.
try and solve it all the time, or we feel like we've done something to upset them,
Yeah.
which I think was so different to when I was growing up. Like if you were upset and angry, they'd send you up to your room and you go and deal with it. Shut the door, stop
Yeah.
making a noise. But nowadays I think we try and solve too much for them, which they can't think for themselves.
Yeah, or if they're bored, we shove a tablet
Mm-hmm.
or a phone in their hand instead of just letting them be bored and figure it out.
Yes,
Or they're
absolutely.
hungry, we
Yeah,
shove food instead of saying it's okay to be hungry. It's not the end of the world. You're not going to starve to death. No one in this
yeah.
family is going to starve to death tonight. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
John,
it's
just
interesting.
to come back on
Yeah,
that difference, the
please.
other problem we've got here is the world in general, psychologically, is based on your perception of it. Nothing to
Hmm.
do with reality. It's what you
Hmm.
think is happening. So you've got two perception systems happening here. You've got the child's who's on the pitch. They're seeing it from their point of view. Then you've got the perception of the parent who's in another position with their own values and needs in a different observable place. So you've got multiple different systems trying to make a kind of, I don't know, make sense of what's going on. How are they going to do that? And so that's why I think a lot of parents and children clash. And to Katie's point, maybe it is the best thing to just be quiet in the car afterwards and let each person process before someone opens their mouth, and before you know it, you're in a massive argument.
Or on the sideline of the game as well, because you're
Yeah.
you're watching the game from a totally different perspective. They're looking north south and you're looking east west. And so Katie, I've had so many former professional athletes who were like you. They're like, I just go sit, and I don't say anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is like I would always go away from where all the parents are in the middle and sit at the end by myself. And inevitably one of the two halves, the other team's goalkeepers, the keeper's dad would come stand in front of me yelling at his kid, and I'd be, excuse me, like there's a reason I'm sitting down here away from everybody. Like
Yeah.
I just want to watch the game. I don't want to say anything. I don't want to. And yes, of course, you see something and you want to fix it. But I mean, especially with football, a perception action sport, like kids need to learn how to make decisions. They need to learn how to solve problems. You solving the problems for them, A, is more distracting. You usually don't solve the problem anyway. And B, you steal the reps from them of getting better. And so it's like at what point are you think they're ready to make decisions, or how about just let them start making them now? And because like you've both seen this, when a kid makes a mistake, like a young kid makes a mistake, I always look at where do they look,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if they get on with it, great. But if they look over at their parents, that's the red flag, right? Of like, there's something
Absolutely.
wrong there.
Well, they're going to get cognitive overload as well, aren't they? Because the
Yeah.
coach has probably told them. I mean, if it's a good coach, they've probably given them two things to concentrate on. if it's not a good coach, they've given them a whole speech about what they want them to do in the game and how, I wouldn't even be able to do that. So how you're expecting a 10, 11-year-old to remember everything you said, I don't
Hmm.
know. But then on top of that, you've got parents shouting other instructions. So not only have I got three or four instructions from the coach, I now got to think about three or four instructions from my mum or dad. And
Yeah.
now I've got eight things to think about. How on earth am I going to remember that? So, and that we know that slows passing down, shooting down, running down, because you're exerting effort to think cognitively about these instructions when in actual fact you want the effort to go into your motor skills. So it
Hmm.
actually, there's lots of evidence to suggest the more instructions you give a child, the slower they are going to be in terms of reacting, running, shooting, for example. So if any parents are listening, I would take advice from John and Katie. And I'm a parent too, got kids who've been in sport. Be quiet. Don't add any more stress because they're already trying to process what the coach has said. Any more instruction, you're going to make them go slower, react slower. Then you're going to have even longer conversation in the car. So yeah, I would be quiet. One good tip I found, and
Hmm.
this is me as a parent. I don't know how I did this, but what I did at one game, I noticed a lot of people shouting at their kids, and I thought I don't want to be that parent. I picked one child from the opposing team who looked quite good and just enjoyed watching them in the game.
Hmm.
And that distracted me from having to concentrate on my children.
Hmm.
I was enjoying how the other child was playing. I wasn't a parent, so I wasn't invested, but I was enjoying the game through
Hmm.
them. And I just wonder whether that's a possible good tip for parents to distract them from over analyzing their own children.
Well, especially young kids, they like young kids when they ask, "What do you want your parents to do in the sideline?" They say cheer for both teams.
Hmm.
Yeah, like they want that. Like they're happy that someone made a good play or whatever. And I mean, I think sadly, right there's so many cameras on professional sport now, and that's sport for entertainment, and it's not a really great example for youth sport, right? I watched the Copa del Rey final on Sunday, and at the end of the game, three red cards, and people throwing stuff at referees. Never mind the mind games with a referee prior to the match and all this sort of stuff, and you're just like that's not what we want for our kids
Hmm.
in sport. That's not the, you know, okay, yeah, we want to win Saturday, but that's not the purpose of sport. And so, I mean, like Katie, what's your advice? Like, how do we separate these things, right? How do we separate the game that we watch on television and everything that goes into that from the the game that our kids are playing that morning?
I think it's hard because they're seeing all this professional sport, aren't they? And a lot of it is being taken from that in terms of, whether it's shouting at the referee or diving or, all of those sort of situations and behaviours of these professional players, are being picked up. And listen, I find that, fans of sport think they know sport inside out. And I think that's the hard part, is that actually they think they're right because they're a fan. They're right in that situation. And I've seen behaviours, with coaches on the sideline and the way they behave. And then you see the change in the children's behaviour on the field. And for me, that's a massive issue, because it's got to start from the adult teaching the kids. If a coach is shouting at the referee, that says it's okay for the kids to do the same thing because you're leading by example. So I've seen many of those things sort of happen. So I think it's not just professional sport that's causing that problem. I think it's people within sport feel like they know sport and it's okay to behave like that. When as an adult, we know it's not okay. And if you're definitely coaching children, you've got to be really conscious of your behaviour and your body language and how you perform in front of those children and what you're teaching those kids. But I guess that just depends on background also, doesn't it? How you've been brought up and your background and stuff like that. But I think we should be conscious of our behaviour.
100%. And I think, I mean, I want to ask both of you, what's a what is your definition, or what does a good youth coach look like? What's a good grassroots coach look like? And Katie, you've had some great ones, and I know you and Emma Hayes, who's the current U.S. women's team coach,
Yeah.
you played for her and with a couple different clubs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I'm assuming you have a good relationship with her. what was it about her on her coaching journey that makes you want to play for that coach? And then how do we take that down to but because again, when you're a professional and you're an international, you need something different from a coach than when you're 10. Um, in some regards, right? Help me get my career ahead, help me get my next contract, help me win a World Cup, whatever it is.
Hmm.
Um, but there's certain qualities that still matter. And I think of Emma Hayes after this last Olympics talking to Lindsay Horan, or Lindsay just got married and I forget her
Yeah.
last name now, but and just she was getting a lot of criticism and I was like she did everything for this team. Right. And I've met Lindsay when she was 13 years old, and her coach at that time said that girl right there is completely different. Like
Hmm.
mentally, physically, everything. She's going to be unbelievable. And she's had this amazing career. But I just remember Lindsay breaking down in tears as Emma described what she meant to her team. You could see this incredible relationship between the two. So talk about Emma Hayes or talk about great coaching in your mind.
Great coaching is being able to manage people, being a good leader, um, and recognizing that every player in that team is an individual. You can't treat them all the same. One can take the hard talking to. One needs an arm around them. People need different things, and I think I was a captain, obviously at Chelsea, and I learned that as a captain that I had to deal with everyone individually. One didn't fit all, and I had to learn to, one I'd shout at to get something out of, which I knew. One I'd have to put an arm around, and I have to gather my team together. And I think one of the traits that Emma has is she's really good people's person. She managed every single person within that squad, and she'll manage them individually. Um, and she gets the best out of people in that regards. We're talking about the same thing. If everyone's happy in an environment, you're going to get the best out of them. And I think that's what she's really, really good at, is building a really good culture and a really good environment where people can be happy. And when you're happy, you thrive. And I think that's one of her really good traits, to be quite honest with you. I mean, I've had a lot of good coaches in my career. Like from a youngster, I was learned if I come into training, I'm there to train
Hmm.
and to train well and to train hard. Not saying that I can't have fun, but if I'm there to train, I'm doing it properly. So I was learned from a young age that if I'm going to train properly. I'm not there to mess about.
Hmm.
I'm there to do well and improve. But I think for the younger age groups, the sole thing for them is just development. The kids need to enjoy it and continue to develop. Of course, we want the winning mentality, but the result doesn't necessarily always matter. As long as they've given everything they possibly can in that game, that's all you can ever ask of them. And they'll learn. They'll keep learning and keep developing.
But
Hmm.
you always make a good point, don't you? You say all the training and effort that kids go through is ultimately to produce enjoyment on the pitch.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It's what can what can I do to myself to get on that pitch and
Hmm.
just enjoy it more? I guess that's what we're trying to do, isn't it? But for some parents, it's the winning and the glory and the best that's kind of overridden that a little bit, which is quite sad, I suppose. And I suppose getting
But
back to
we
your
also
original
want
point,
them
John.
to be good at everything. Do you know what I mean? I was the quietest person off the pitch. I couldn't. I was so unconfident off the pitch. On the pitch, I was like a different person. You
Hmm.
put me on there, that was my place to be. I could come alive. Off the pitch, ask me a question, I wouldn't talk to anybody. But that was just
Why
me. That
was
was
that?
how I was. I don't know. I don't know whether it's because I was a twin and my sister was always the more confident and I
Uh-huh.
was the most reserved. But then the other way round, I had more determination than her, so our traits were completely different.
Mm.
And I think we try and like bring things out of kids. We're like, oh, why are you not like, or why don't you talk as much as that person? But I actually think they develop at different stages. And I think we just got to let them be and let them figure it out themselves because they will, but
Hmm.
we want them to have it right now. You
Yeah.
need to do this right now. And I think, that puts a pressure on them also.
Yeah. And I think that's such an interesting point because we've kind of hinted at this. Like you can't skip the steps. There's no,
Mm-hmm.
so part of this development is this slow, steady, as the Japanese would say, kaizen, like slow, steady, gradual, continuous improvement. And so many
Mm-hmm.
parents want to fast forward that because maybe they saw someone else make that jump or whatever. But it's like, no, you just gotta like bit by bit. And I think that's where brilliant coaches come in is help them see the on the good days, great, well done. Now do this. And on the other days, okay, that's just part of the journey. And the coaches we've had on here, household names, they all talk about the relationship, right? That coaching is a relationship business. It's not an X's and O's business. And coaches are, you go to coaching school and you're taught all the X's and O's and the periodization and this and that, but it's about relationships. And when you're good at that, then you're best. And you use the word happy. And that's the biggest challenge, right? You're a football coach and you have 23 players at a World Cup, and here's your starting 11. Well, there's 12 people who are already unhappy, right? Because they're not on the field. And so, but
Yeah.
keeping them feeling like I do have a role, I am
Yes.
contributing, that's great leadership.
Yeah, it is great leadership. And I've experienced that a lot in my career in terms of, you need to make sure everyone's happy. And they do play a role. It's not the starting 11 squad because they'll be needed at any given point. It's about the whole team, about the whole squad. And I think it's important that, you're a really good leader. If you can keep the whole squad happy, that is a good sign of a good leader.
Yeah.
You can
Simon.
do that with children as well, I think. And I think
Yeah.
that's forgotten. You can motivate children personally. What we do in football, for example, and I'm sure it happens in other sports, is we pick a football related skill to label them. So they're good at dribbling, or, they're good at striking, or they're good at defending or whatever. What we could do is move sideways slightly. And to this personal point, we can say to someone to make them feel as equally important or feel that they are as important to think, oh, you're the voice of the team. You're the, I don't know, you're the energizer of the team. You're the whatever it might be. So describe things in a different way because then you've got more chance to make everyone feel important in that team rather than just say, oh, well, they're the striker, I'm not. It's like, yeah, but you're still important to us because you're the voice. When we need someone, you speak up and get everyone kind of rallied around a little bit. And I think we forget to do that. And I think if we do that more often, you're going to engage more of the children because they're going to go, oh, I do have a role. And it is, oh, okay, the coach does value me. It's not just my feet that's doing the talking here. It's other things that they value as well, for example.
And when you highlight and you praise behaviors rather than technical skills, everyone controls a behavior, right? Like you're a hard worker, great. You are resilient, fantastic. You are so positive, you're always getting everyone's energy up. You own that, right? Like I control that, whereas I don't control I scored 3 goals today or whatever. Like there's a lot of people that have something to say in that. And so I think I always stress to coaches that your job, especially at the grassroots level, is teaching behaviors. Because if you get the behaviors right and you repeat them over time and you have the genetics and the mentality and these things, that's your best chance for an athlete to make it, regardless of sport. But so often we focus on the ability side of things and we ignore the behaviors, or we let the kid who shines brightly early, be a lousy teammate, not work hard because they're still the best, even if they don't work hard, don't train well, whatever, but that eventually catches up with them. And so I think this is so important that we're constantly
Yeah.
stressing if you are managing children at the grassroots level, teach behaviors. And I see, Katie, you're nodding your head.
Talent will only get you so far.
Yeah.
The rest won't. And that exactly that. You need to, build. It's about building a culture of expectation. And yeah, what you expect. This is what you bring. This is what you bring. And it's a team of, as we said, individual people. They're all
Mhm.
very different. If we have a team of the same people doing the same thing, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. So you're going to take all the positives away from all them kids and you bring them all together. And that's what makes a great team. Is that
Mhm.
you all bring individual parts to that, whether it is, the leadership, the communication, whether it's you're the physical one battling, in the centre of the pitch, whether it's the one going down the line with the skills and, the quickest one or whatever it is. We've all got strengths, we've all got weaknesses. So just focus on those strengths of those players And of course, bring up the weaknesses, but focus on their strengths and build it around the team. Build a team around all of those things
Mm-hmm.
and be creative.
It's the process, isn't it? It's what we need. I mean, you know this in psychology. The more you motivate people on the process rather than the outcome, the more successful you'll take them on that journey, and the more energized they'll be.
Mm-hmm.
But to one of the points you made, John, where partly where we, we're to blame for this as sort of coaches as well, because some of the things we do are, they're not aligned to what we say.
Mm-hmm.
So we
Mm-hmm.
tell people to do something, but our body language or whatever, doesn't kind of support what we do. So one of the things I find really interesting, I hear this a lot in games, is you'll hear a coach say, "Oh, one of the things that really annoys me is the team's not consistent, or the children are not consistent.
Mm-hmm.
They'll be up one week and down another week." And so then when you listen in the next hour what the coaches are doing, what they do is they become very animated when the children makes a mistake, and they become very animated and loud when the children does something that we call a wow moment. All the consistent normal things that you'd want from a player. Can't hear anything. It's very quiet. Why are you not praising them to do that? So no wonder the children are looking for the next wow moment,
Mm-hmm.
because that's when they get praised. Now, trying to search for that wow moment, they're likely to make more mistakes, because to create a wow moment, you've got to take more risk.
Mm-hmm.
So it just interests me from a psychology perspective that they're sometimes creating their own problems by doing that. And the other thing is, if you look at their behavior on the sidelines, if you're trying to motivate someone and you've got a team of, 15 people in front of you, you don't stand still and talk to them. If you want someone's attention, you walk towards them as if you are engaging with them and they are of interest. You don't just stand there and pivot your head. That's not going to get much of a reaction. So I don't think coaches are trained from a non-verbal point of view, have how to reinforce their interactions and underline their motivational kind of speeches, talks, interactions with young players either. I think that needs to happen more in sport.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I mean, one of the most impressive coaches that I used to love watching coach was Jill Ellis when she was coaching the US. Because whether it was a bicycle kick goal or things falling apart, she just kind of stood there leaning against the dugout. Like, she was so even keeled, and I've heard her speak about this. Just, she remembered as a kid coaches being inconsistent up and down and whatever, and she's like, I never like that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so I when things are going badly, I want them to look to the sideline and see me calm and serene, because they need to be calm and serene. And
Mm-hmm.
when they score a great goal, yes, that's awesome, but they also have to play the next play. And I think it's great. And that's authentically her. And I think authenticity is important as well, because that would never work for Diego Simeone at Atletico Madrid. That's him. And so his players know him and understand him, and that's him, and that's Jill. But I think in a moment when things are falling apart, Jill Ellis's demeanor is much more calming as a player than Diego Simeone being restrained by three assistant coaches trying to scream at the fourth official.
Mm-hmm.
But it works for both.
Yeah, but
And I
they've got to
guess you
play to
get
their
to learn,
strengths,
don't
haven't
you?
they? Yeah.
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 Go ahead, Katie.
You get to learn, don't you? You get to learn your coach and how their behaviours are, in the environment you're in. And I think you have to try and adapt to that. But I think for kids, that's really hard. As an adult, that's easier because you know what to expect and their behaviours. But I think as a kid, and you see someone, especially in a negative moment, and their body language is really poor.
Mm-hmm.
That's really hard to deal with. I know myself, being a player myself, that have seen those things. And, you've made a mistake, you've got someone screaming at you. Internally you've made a mistake. You've made the wrong decision. The last thing you want is someone reiterating that and screaming at you. And that's what I'm saying to you. When you've got parents on the sideline, like, a child knows they've made a mistake, but they also need to know it's okay to make a mistake, because actually, when you make mistakes, it's your biggest learnings.
Mm-hmm.
You either keep trying to do that and you get it right, or you change something. And that's how they learn and develop. But yeah, with us barking at them just puts fear into them.
Yeah.
We've also forgotten that it's not just the coach and us barking at them. Their other teammates and the opposition are going to be barking at them as well. They've got so many streams of consciousness thrown at them.
Yeah.
It's like, no wonder they get overwhelmed. And it's like, it's not going to help if you add to that stream of noise by shouting other stuff. And they probably can't even hear what you're saying. All they can hear is like, you're angry.
Yeah.
at the side. I mean, it's interesting. You know, when you ask players what were you listening to, it's like, well, I was only listening to my friend next door to me because I couldn't hear anything else.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Or the coach who goes on the 9 minute halftime rant, and then you ask the kid after, what do you say? I don't know.
Hmm.
I got nothing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
to keep it
no.
simple. I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? It's like
Yeah.
kids should probably have no more than two instructions: run up
Yeah.
the wing and pass it into the box. Whatever. Keep it simple.
Yeah. Well, we had a really interesting guy on the podcast. You asked me before, in like interesting podcasts, a guy named Eamon Devlin who's doing work on halftime, and he's doing a PhD on halftime talks and what players remember and what they don't and all this sort of stuff. And one of the things that he talked about is at halftime, as soon as the coach starts talking, players stop eating and drinking. Right? So they're not rehydrating, they're not refueling, they're just listening to the coach. And so how important it is to give them that time in the beginning that belongs to them.
Hmm.
And the analogy he used was it's like you're an air traffic controller and all these planes are up in the air. Well, they got to land and then they have to take off in an orderly manner to start again. And so being intentional about what you say before the game, what you say at halftime, and what you say after is absolutely critical. And that after, I mean, we mentioned it a little bit, like the car ride home. This is the moment that most kids say is their worst memory of sports, is the car ride home because they're locked in the car and mom or
Hmm.
dad's going to make this a teachable moment. And oftentimes it's the least teachable moment. So Simon, first you, like, what is your advice for that moment after? And then Katie, I want to hear maybe your experience with your own kids and your own parents of what do we do with that space? But
I
Simon,
mean,
go ahead.
I would echo what Kate said. I think we just let the children themselves speak. I mean, I do the same with my children. I've learned just to let them get in the car and, not, I don't even have a conversation about the football, for example. Sometimes I
Mhm.
might talk about what we're having for dinner later or, what we're going to do later on. Don't mention football. I leave it for them to raise when they're ready, they might come in very excited and want to talk to me. They might kind of just want to sit there and sort of just think themselves about the game before they collect their thoughts. The other thing with children is it takes them longer to collect and process information. So by asking them as soon as they sit down in the car, you're putting them under stress again because they're like, I haven't even thought about it. I've literally just come off a major sporting event. I'm trying to kind of get my breath back and calm down a bit. And now you're giving me a cognitive task to do. I've just done a big physical one. Give me some space to just
Mhm.
process. They're two different things. So I would say my advice would be give them, you've alluded to it, John, and Katie's mentioned it before. Give them the space. Just be quiet. Let them settle. They will talk to you when they're ready to talk to you.
Mhm.
If you do it yourself, it's probably not going to end well.
Mhm. Mhm. Katie.
Do you know what I think from the halftime perspective that you're talking about? Sometimes ask them how it feels, the game.
Yeah.
Because I think, as a player in the game, it feels different to what you're actually seeing on the sideline.
Yeah.
You might see this player trying to make a pass down the line, or you're telling him to make a pass down the line. He's like, I can't actually do it because that player's in the way or that player's coming across. Like, so ask sometimes the question and see if you can get answers from the players on the field. It also interacts them then in terms of education
Mhm.
because it's not just you talking to them, they're engaging more because they're actually, you're asking them a question and they're answering you. So actually, they're going to take in a lot more from that than you just talking to them. I think from my point of view with the car situation, I mean, my sons will get in the car and they'll talk to me if they want to talk to me. Or if I start talking to them and I get no reaction from them, I'll just shut off. I don't say anything else. I'll
Mhm.
just turn the music up or whatever, just don't say anything else. So it's about reading, I think, the room as well. And, do they actually want to engage? Because as Simon said, they don't half the time. If something's gone well, they will. If it's not gone so great, then they absolutely don't. And the last
Mhm.
thing they need is for negativity from you to be reiterating what mistakes they've made. Because as we talk about, they've probably done 1,000 great things in that game, and there's two things they've done wrong, but that's what they'll remember. I remember that as a player. I'll
Mhm.
always remember. You ask me what mistakes I've made in that game, I could reel them off like that. You ask me what I did well, I'd be like, it'd be harder for me to find. what I did well, but the mistakes would come out just like that. So I think I think being conscious of they're little people.
Yeah,
You
well,
know what? I take it for what it is. It's kids football,
And
isn't
that's
it? Like
coming from
kids
a
sport.
Champions League winner and an FA Cup winner
yeah.
and a mum. And if we can't take that advice from someone who's been on both perspectives, then it's kind of going on deaf ears a little bit, isn't
Well,
it?
you said before, Katie, which I would do as well. You said, you would say, well, what went well out there today, and what didn't go as well, or what needs work, and those two questions right there. And okay, well, what can you do in training this week? Those are absolutely critical. And that was
Yeah.
like my daughter would get in the car and she would settle down, and then she would ask me, well, how do you think I did? Right, and that was. And I would, that's what I would ask her, right? Best game ever, worst game ever, same three questions.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get that out. My son, the question, how did I do today, never once occurred to him in the car. It was, how long till we can eat, right? Like, where's the food? And then, but then, like, we had an agreement that in the evening or the next day, when the emotions are gone, okay, now
Mm-hmm.
let's talk about it. And that worked. And that goes back to like know your child, know your kids, know what they want. And I think that moment right there, let them own that moment after the
Mm-hmm.
game. Because
Yeah.
oftentimes as a parent, we're not prepared to have a rational conversation either.
Yeah. No,
We're
absolutely.
upset.
I think so leading on from that, John, just to finish off of the point, Katie and I, the next episode that we were thinking of putting together on our podcast was actually trying to talk to some of the children and their parents separately. So first
Mm,
of all, asking the children how the game went and their perception, and
mm.
then getting the same game read from the parent to see how similar was it or how dissimilar is it, for example. I think that'd be really interesting.
I
Yeah.
think it's fascinating, and this is the like I think this not that that's necessarily a research project, but this is the type of I think interesting insights we're starting to get into sport is like what's your child's perspective, what's your perspective, whose perspective matters,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because, and especially if they're totally divergent and you think this was a total disaster and the kid was happy and can't wait to go have a sleepover at Jenny's house, well, like that's a problem when you're canceling the sleepover so you can go do extra work in the garden the next day.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
I mean, there is one elephant in the room, probably
Yeah.
that we haven't mentioned, in the fact that obviously, sort of, children in sport now is quite expensive, isn't it? It's quite expensive if for you
In the
to
UK too? I mean,
yeah,
here,
yeah,
yes.
definitely. If you want to fund your
Mm-hmm.
child, if it's at a club or training, it does cost money. Let's not kind of,
Yeah.
I suppose, not discuss that. And so, to the point you just made, John, what I think a lot of parents become invested because they go, well, what's my investment doing? And they get mistaken because they think investment is going to create a professional sports person because like it's a business investment, isn't it?
Hmm.
But as to Katie's point, shouldn't we just be thinking that we're investing it in the happiness of my child? They're enjoying it. If they do want to play football and then go for a sleepover at Caitlin's house, what's the problem? You've
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
invested you've invested X amount for the game in the afternoon, but they had fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. And I think that's my advice is always start at the end. What do you want your child to be like because of their sporting experience? Who have you surrounded them with? Are they healthy physically, emotionally, mentally?
Mm-hmm.
Start there and work backwards. Don't just, you want that, but then not be intentional about the situations that you put them in all along, just assuming, because sport is neither good nor bad. It's just neutral. It's whoever is wielding it, coaching it, running it, that's going
Mm-hmm.
to make it a positive or negative experience. So. I know
Definitely.
we're running out of time here. Simon, I'll give you your last thought and word, and then Katie, I'll give you the last word here. And also, Simon, if you can, just tell people where they can catch up, website, podcast, all that sort of stuff too.
Sure. I mean, I just think, look, we're dealing with people who, are not fully formed yet. Their brains are still developing. Their identities are still developing. They're trying to see where they fit in the world. And so, if the more advice we give them from different angles is just going to add to the confusion. So I think I'd sort of echo what you've both been saying is that we need to give them a little bit of space. If you want them to be fully functional, kind of independent beings, then they need to kind of experience that independence to some extent. and explore the world in their own kind of way and deal with feedback on their own 2 feet. So I think, parents listening, I know it's really, really hard, but, if we can be a little bit quieter, be a bit more respectful, that you have another human being in front of you, then that's got to be a good thing for them, hasn't it? And in terms of listening to our podcast, we are on, you can catch us on the web. I think a lot of the episodes are, I'll repeat that. I think a
Yeah.
lot of the episodes are held on our website, which is whatsmygoal.co.uk. Or if you're interested, you can email us at whatsyourgoalpodcast@gmail.com. Happy to hear from you.
Awesome. Katie, final thoughts, last word?
I think from our perspective, listen, parents, we're not saying that you don't love your child and you don't support them. I think it's about being conscious of your behaviour. And it's not always what's said, it's your body language too. Just be conscious around the kids. Praise obviously goes a long way. Guide as best you possibly can, but be as quiet as you can also in that regard. Allow the kids to be kids, enjoy it for what it is. It's grassroots, they are still developing, and it's important that they make mistakes. There's no one that's perfect. Even the athletes of a pro level, continuously make mistakes. We're sitting there as fans screaming at the TV, why did you do that? Why? It's the same for the kids. You think about that behavior and towards those players, and you as a fan, and then you doing that to a child, it makes a massive impact. So just be conscious of behavior.
I know you won't believe this, John, but I've even seen Katie do a few missed passes when she plays football with us. Hard to believe, I know.
Absolutely, we're human, right? We all make mistakes.
Yeah.
It's part of life, it's part of growing up, it's part of developing, and it's part of making you who you are. So let them
But
be.
what she's really good at, John, I always say this about Katie. When she plays football, she's one of the most encouraging voices on that pitch. He will, whatever you do, she'll either laugh along with you, which often happens when she's playing with me, or she'll be like, well done, keep going, you can do it, really motivating. And I think that's, we say about what did she learn as a leader? You can tell she was a captain.
Yeah. And you know what? That's amazing. And we didn't have time to explore that as much, but I think that's, such an important thing. I mean, another moment I think about a lot on this podcast, we had Wes Brown on, Champions League winner at Man United, and he was talking about Roy Keane. And everyone thinks Roy Keane's, the hair dryer captain. He's like, Roy Keane was the first one at your locker, one-on-one, to be like, what you did today, phenomenal. Keep it up. Young player, do this, do your job. Simple, whatever it was. Like, he's like, everyone thinks he was the guy who ripped your head off, but he was the most encouraging guy when you did what you needed to do for the team. And that didn't appear on TV, but that's leadership and the type of captain that Simon just described as you, Katie. Like, that's who I want to play with. That's who I want to play for. Like you said, I know I made a mistake. I don't need you to remind me, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't mean it. I didn't do it on purpose. So encourage me, and I'm less likely to make the next one. Yep. Brilliant.
And remember, it's team, isn't it? It's not about individuals, it's team.
Yeah.
If you're in a team sport, it's about the team. If you're in an individual sport, great. But, it's about the team. It's about bringing the team together to be the best they possibly can. All being on the same page and all bringing your strengths to that team to make it successful. That's the aim.
Amen. Well, listen, thank you both so much for being on the Way of Champions. I truly appreciate it.
No, great. Thank you for inviting us on. Been great.
Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks to Katie Chapman. Thanks to Simon Moore. Again, whatsmygoal.co.uk is the website. What's Your Goal is the podcast. And What's Your Goal podcast gmail.com if you want to get in touch. But it's always amazing to have someone with Katie's resume, 94 caps, Champions League winner, multiple time FA Cup winner, WSL winner, played all over the world at the highest level, and get her perspective on how can we best support our kids? And then obviously Simon as a psychologist and everything like that. So I'm so excited. Check out their podcast. They've got some great guests, either in the queue or already out there. Top professional athletes, psychologists, nutritionists on how you can make your kids experience a great one. Okay. Thanks to our friends at Sprocket Sports. Thank you to all of our premium members at Changing the Game Project and our Patreon podcast champions who help us put this out every week. And thank you all of you who have reached out and booked a speaker and bought bulk books and just bought our books and supported the work that we do here. Because as Jerry and I always say, your influence is never neutral. So go out there this week, change the world, make a difference, leave a positive impact. We'll see you again next week, everybody.